well, it's time now for some business news, and we're starting with a high-profile conviction for tax fraud in the U.S. against the Trump Organization. Our business editor, Charles Pellegrin, is here with more. Hi, Charles.
Hi, Erin. Absolutely. This is just one of the many legal challenges faced by Trump as he's once again running for the White House. Now, a Manhattan jury has found that Donald Trump's business venture is guilty of all 17 counts of a tax fraud scheme over the course of 13 years. The Trump Organization is charged with artificially reducing the amount of tax it pays by awarding undeclared perks to its executives. People like former Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg, who was a key witness for the prosecution. He previously pleaded guilty of receiving over $1.76 million in unreported income in the form of luxury apartments, cars, and tuition for his grandchildren's private school. A lawyer from the Trump Organization says it plans to appeal. As for the sentence, it could be a fine of just over $1 million, but the real damage could come from getting access to new loans or government contracts. And staying in the U.S., current President Joe Biden is claiming that the country's manufacturing sector is making a comeback. He was visiting the site of a TSMC semiconductor plant in Phoenix ahead of a full opening in 2024. This was an opportunity for the Taiwanese microchip giant to announce it was increasing its investment in the U.S. and building a second plant in Arizona by 2026, bringing back semiconductor production to the U.S. in order to end over-reliance on Asian supply chains has been one of Joe Biden's policy priorities. Take a listen.
Over 30 years ago, America had more than 30% of the global chip production. Then something happened. American manufacturing, the backbone of our economy, began to get hollowed out. Companies moved jobs overseas. Today we're down to producing only around 10% of the world's chips, despite leading the world in research and design of new chip technologies.
And some contradictory economic information out of China this Wednesday. First off, weak trade data for the month of November. Both exports and imports shrank compared to a year ago. Chinese exports fell 9% to just over $296 billion, while imports fell close to 11% to just over $226 billion. For reference, in October, both those figures fell by just under 1%. This can be explained by weakening international demand for Chinese products, as well as the antivirus restrictions imposed by Beijing in the previous month. But there is hope. After nationwide protests last week, Beijing announced this Wednesday a series of measures that will roll back some of the most severe COVID controls. For instance, limiting the scope of lockdowns to individual apartments, floors, or buildings instead of whole neighborhoods. And people with mild symptoms will be able to quarantine at home, all of which will have a positive impact for the economy going forward. Let's look at the Asian stock markets. All indices trading lower, even if the Hang Seng in Hong Kong did briefly trade up on the news of those government announcements, following in the footsteps of Wall Street on Tuesday, which closed in the red on fears the Federal Reserve will continue with its policy of rising interest rates. And we're seeing the same concerns at play at the open in Europe with mixed trading. We can see the FTSE in London up by just under 1/3%. But the DAX in Frankfurt down by 1/4%, and the Paris CAC 40 trading almost flat. And in Mongolia, allegations of government corruption and soaring inflation have pushed protesters to try and storm the country's parliament on Sunday. At the heart of the protest is the alleged theft of coal by government officials involved in trade with China. All of this while 1 in 3 Mongolians live in poverty. Guillaume Goujon has a story.
Angry protesters stormed the Mongolian parliament, accusing officials of stealing, following allegations of corruption linked to the country's coal trade with China.
They promised us a better life. They are supposed to make things better, but they aren't doing anything. Taking our money, filling their own bellies.
And how they could just be like so calm when the citizens are like buying bread like by slice, not by the loaf. So that's the reason why I'm protesting today, for the good of the people.
The protests were sparked by an alleged theft of 385,000 tons of coal from a stockpile in the Tavan-Tolgoi regions on the border with China. 3 mining companies, including one state-owned, are operating in the area. Mining accounts for around a quarter of Mongolia's GDP and over 80% of the country's foreign exports. Mongolia thrived for the first 2 decades after transitioning to democracy in the 1990s. However, the economy has since faced several setbacks, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. Inflation has soared to 15%, with 1 in 3 people still living in poverty.
And let's end with a surprising solution to a Japanese labor conundrum. The answer has 2 words, which are spider robots. Japan has been having issues with the maintenance of its aging sewer system, partly because it lacks the manpower to inspect the pipes that are nearing their 50-year lifespan. But Japanese robotics startup Timsuck has developed the SPD-1 robot to carry out those inspections. It's 25 centimeters in width and height, has a 360-degree camera, and perhaps most frighteningly, 8 legs. It's still a prototype, but could be on the market, Erin, after April 2024.
Definitely less scary than real spiders, Charles, and certainly more helpful. Charles Pellegrin with Business. Thank you very much.